the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and privileged to have Julian Wendt from nWebbed joining us on the show for the first time. How are you, Julian?
Doing well. Thank you very much for having me, Paul.
Yeah, look, great to have you on the show. Maybe you can just let people know where you fit into this big wide world of tech in New Zealand.
Sure. So I come from a technical background, so have been involved in security analysis, incident response, and security consulting in the form of technical assessments, that sort of thing. And for the past few years have been entirely focused on nWebbed Intelligence, which is the darknet monitoring tool we've been developing.
Excellent. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting into that. So a bit more to chat about across the show. So we'll jump into the tech news and so on of the week. And of course, before we do that, a big thank you to our show partners, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, Workday, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Well, first up this week, we have now the latest report from NZ Tech, not a related entity to the New Zealand Tech Podcast, but from NZ Tech with their tech sector kind of, I guess, key metrics that they've shared. And look, one thing that I find still surprises people is just the scale of the tech sector in New Zealand and its importance to New Zealand. And in fact, I had this with a topic that came up recently on Herald Now with Ryan Bridge, and he was a little bit taken aback at the potential for the tech sector to become New Zealand's number one export earner in potentially the next few years ahead. And he had no idea because of the way that the statistics and numbers are broken down from an export perspective. Usually tech isn't on the list. And this is part of the reality, I guess. The threads of technology run through every part of business, every industry. What do you count as tech, what's not, and so on, right? And exactly. And even when you look at our number one export earner being dairy, of course there are elements of technology, being used
absolutely
on the farm and right through the process from start to finish
and exported. I mean, if you're talking about dairy specifically, we've got Kotahi, the logistics arm of Fonterra, and they develop a lot of tech in-house, and they will use that with their partners and export it effectively. So to your point, it runs through so many different industries, and that's probably why a lot of people don't realize just how much of a factor it plays in our economy.
Yep. And the likes of Halter, of course. There's really just so much when it comes to the world of that's just agritech. So that's probably was one of the first things to sort of call out on the report. Now, in this report that we'll be linking to in the show notes, so you can go and delve into the PDF and explore it in your own time. They quote 11.4 billion New Zealand dollars worth of tech goods and services exported in 2024. So it does take a little while for this report to get to us. We're obviously a good chunk of the way through into 2025, but great to see these numbers and to see the increases. And it's also, I think, encouraging in the current economy where things have been pretty tough to recognize that those that are involved in the tech sector are involved in a sector that is growing. It continues to grow at pace. I think here they're talking about the overall sort of combined revenue, not just export, being 18.2 billion. So some really good numbers. And yeah, I think there's lots of positives in there. It's not all perfectly rosy in the current economy, but there's certainly some pretty positive takeaways. It is interesting to see the breakdown of I guess how things are sort of split up between Auckland and Northland and Waikato and all the different regions around the country in terms of the workforce, so the people. And at the moment we're seeing in total across they put two categories, high-tech manufacturing and ICT. And if we look at those in total, they're saying 52.3% are in Auckland. That's followed by Wellington, and then Canterbury, where the biggest sort of slices are, followed by, I think it's Waikato and then Bay of Plenty and onto Otago. So lots of good employment going on right around the country and even into small regions.
Yeah, really heartening to see. And there's still so much more room to grow. That's the beauty of exporting knowledge. You can export it time and again, and we are a very curious and innovative culture. So it only fits that we should start leveraging that a little bit more.
And the other thing that stood out was on our software exports side. So they're saying over the last decade, 22% compound annual growth rate. So just continues to be really significant, and that's across a really broad range of software that's being exported. But that's exactly as you say, when you're exporting bits and bytes and data
right.
and
you can
apps
export
and so
it over
on.
and over.
It's a great place to be. So it's good to see that growth is continuing strong.
And something which I don't think a lot of New Zealanders consider is our reputation internationally. We have a very good reputation internationally as a trustworthy partner, as having good business processes and controls to ensure that if you purchase software from New Zealand or purchase anything from New Zealand, you're going to be well looked after. It's going to be properly supported. And you don't get that with every country. And now add to that all the geopolitical tensions going on. We've kept our noses clean there too, relatively speaking. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to export software and for us to export our knowledge.
Also on the local front, and for those who listened in last week, we delved in quite a lot to AWS's local New Zealand region data center announcement. So that we probably will tap in a little bit on that topic to round that out a fraction more. But we'll talk about that in conjunction with some other things. But on the sort of, I guess, also on a local front, interesting to read about this new campaign and app called Pātea, which is designed to help reduce gambling harm in New Zealand. And the stats I saw RNZ reporting was gambling loss in the country at over 2.6 billion each year, and Māori and Pacifica being disproportionately affected. And so what we've got with this this new app and the supporting campaign and so on, is there is this real focus on guess providing tools that are maybe more culturally helpful to help families kind of deal with the challenges related to gambling. So always really encouraging to see technology being used in innovative ways to solve non-technology problems, but technology coming in and being leveraged in smart ways. And yeah, these things are really, really challenging to deal with. So yeah, it's good to see those efforts. So we should be able to link to that in the show notes as well. We know when you hear figures like that, it's a reminder that there are probably more families than we would like that are impacted by these sorts of challenges, right?
It's addiction. Anything we can do to help reduce the effects of addiction, and I mean, we're speaking specifically about gambling here, but in general, I am 100% supportive, and hopefully we can help undo some damage there.
Now onto the global front, I think a lot of people would have seen somewhere around Trump's tech dinner, his own version of the New Zealand Tech Podcast, but the Trump White House version, where a whole lot of tech titans from across the US put their heads together over a meal. Now we don't have too much detail on what was and wasn't discussed, but there's certainly the media were able to sort of film a portion of it. And I don't know if you caught some of it, but what I noticed when I saw the coverage, and it was zooming in on the likes of Tim Cook from Apple, and Bill Gates and Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera, et cetera. So the top leaders when it comes to the tech world, and there was effectively each of them in the bit that I caught with thanking Trump for being awesome, and then highlighting how much money that they were investing. And this is where there felt to me like a little bit of a link with what we were talking about last week with AWS's re-announce or recommitment to a $7.5 billion investment into New Zealand, which based on what's been shared to back it up, feels very hollow. And it seemed quite like that. And in fact, there was a hot mic moment where it turned out that I think Mark Zuckerberg had been a little bit caught out, even though these questions, and I'm not sure what order they were asked and when they got to him, but he was asked what Meta were investing, and I think he came back with a $600 billion figure or some a really, really big number. After we had heard a range of other big numbers, it was Microsoft that was maybe at the softer end, which is interesting because when we look at their market cap, they're second only to Nvidia, and heading in the direction of being a $4 trillion US business. And what they were talking about investing was maybe a tenth of what Apple or Meta were suggesting. So I don't know how it felt for you, but to me it's really just quite hard to believe some of the figures that were put on the table. And with that hot mic moment where Zuckerberg was caught apologizing or just discussing with Trump quietly afterwards, like, oh, I was a little bit caught out by that. Wasn't sure what number you wanted me to say. And so that was what popped into my head, sort of thing. I'm just not sure that there's the substance behind some of the numbers.
We see that quite a lot with, especially some of those tech companies you've just mentioned. And it's interesting that Microsoft have been much softer on that front. Microsoft have a much more mature business model in a lot of ways. And I have found that the numbers that they claim they're going to invest in something tend to stack up a lot more in hindsight than what we hear from some of these other names we've just mentioned. Also, just backing up a little bit, if we want to compare Trump's tech podcast and ours, we're going to have to be a lot more self-congratulatory.
Julian, you're looking good today, mate. How much are you investing?
I believe it was 600 billion.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right, we're catching up. Look, it just throws me when we've got what appears to be blatant either dishonesty or stretching of the truth, right? Because it depends how you look at these things. But I had a and I won't disclose the name because I was asked to keep it quiet. But after last week's episode came out, I had a communication from a what would you say? One of the top executives in a company that competes pretty closely with AWS after listening to the episode, and they were certainly challenging the believability of what was said. And look, I've been looking at some of the numbers that have been shared publicly. There has been some other good content online discussing this topic. I think it was Newsroom who came out very, very strongly, pushing back on AWS's claims. Now, I'm not sure, how much on these topics, and it is hard when AWS haven't shared too much publicly. So it's a little bit hard to know exactly what is fact and what is kind of joining up the dots and speculation. But certainly some pretty big pushback on AWS's claims. But one of the numbers that I saw floating around out there was suggesting that Microsoft's data center that was right next to the one that everyone was expecting AWS to open and is still unbuilt out in Westgate area, West Auckland. The numbers I saw on that are in the sort of 300 million New Zealand dollar range. So how you get from that to the 7.5 billion, is this over 100 years? It's it concerns me. And I think what it does is it creates a scenario of distrust where, well, how can we now
100%.
trust these firms if they're not being honest with us, or if they're not being straight with us? And it's not good. And certainly I was left with a number of questions around the new jobs, the numbers, and in fact I messaged some of the folks at AWS and said, look, by your lack of transparency, really you create a trustworthiness issue for AWS now within the New Zealand market. And before last week, this was a brand that generally had a lot of trust. Now, I'm sure, this will get forgotten in time and so on as these things do. But right now, it's I think it takes away an edge of credibility away from away from AWS. And I think one of the things that they were really clear on with me when I asked questions around their data centers was, and this is a global thing, so they're just falling into line with global guidance, was they refused to really tell me anything in terms of ownership of data centers, locations, and and the like. One of them is, we can't possibly let you know where any of our data centers are. Well, I went online and looked up where there are data centers in Australia. It's all public information. Like, you can't hide that sort of information, right? So there's a level of ridiculousness to it, and this is something that I guess their local, public relations, folks in New Zealand and Australia just have to follow the guidance that they've been given internationally. But it makes everyone in this part of the world, look not good, including their local country manager, who's probably a very, very capable and talented leader, but because he was dodging around the questions and not answering straight as well, it calls the credibility of these leaders into question.
100%. I mean, you've already touched on it. This is something we're seeing more and more from these types of tech companies. They will stretch the truth, and I think it helps get splashy headlines, maybe bring up share prices for a few weeks as people get really excited, but it's to the detriment of long-term credibility. So I don't know what your take is on it, but what I'm seeing is they're taking that short-term approach of, the shares will be worth more tomorrow if we make these big outlandish claims today, and they don't really think about, how is that going to impact us next year?
Yeah, and we've seen it, in other announcements in the US over the last few years with, we're a company saying we're opening X sort of factory in the US, and then the factory, we're making a big tech investment into the US, and then the factory never, eventuates. And these big numbers that we heard at that dinner with Trump, and these recent announcements, I just don't think they're good, and I hope it doesn't set a trend. And I think it's actually appropriate that there should be backlash against this sort of thing. And I'll certainly be asking more questions going forward when we get these sorts of announcements of, hey, I'm not sure I believe you need to back it up. And I think at the moment what we're not getting is the backing up some of these claims and these numbers. And I think if we were to look again in a year's time, 2 years' time, and I don't know how much information will be available, but it would be interesting as to who's actually met their investment commitments in New Zealand, the US, and other areas. And probably we won't know because there won't be enough transparency either. So
exactly.
You can't be sure.
So I think it's great that you will continue to ask those questions, the what happened here question, and hopefully we won't just see lots of dodging and dancing.
Now, something very positive, I think, on the Amazon front is Project Kuiper. So this is, I guess, the closest thing we have to a Starlink competitor. Not launched publicly yet, but just in the last few days, we saw that Amazon have signed up JetBlue. Pretty good US airline. I think they've probably had some struggles in the last few years, but I've flown them a few times and found them to be a reasonable airline. So they are going to be, in fact, they might have been the first airline that I went on that had free in-flight Wi-Fi, and this will be going back a good few years. And of course, in-flight Wi-Fi's now been around for a really long time, since we've that was first trialed and so on. But they're going to be relying on Project Kuiper to deliver that. And the other bit of news was they've shared some pre-launch speed test results and seeing speeds that are a lot more impressive than Starlink, and how this actually plays out in the longer term, what their pricing is. Are they just focusing on the business market, or are they going to be doing a direct compete with Starlink over time? There's a fair bit more. We'll see how that actually plays out in reality once they're in the market and they're rolling.
I'll also be interested to see whether they're prepared to do deals with the defence sector, whether they want to keep it civilian or whether they go down that route. I mean, Starlink kind of split itself in two in order to serve the defence sector as well. I'll be very interested to see what Amazon do in that regard.
On to other topics. The big tech event that happens in Germany each year, in Berlin, IFA, is taking place now. Lots and lots and lots of tech announcements over there. It kind of almost halfway between. Actually, it's a bit further than halfway, but from CES, which takes place in January in the US, and lots of tech announcements there. But yeah, there's a bunch there. Probably won't really delve into those today, but I see Chris Keel from New Zealand Herald is over there, so he's sharing a little bit from there. One of the tech brands has taken him across, so I'm sure he will be enjoying that. One of the things that did come up on my radar, and I guess it's a brand we've talked about a few times over the years, is Philips Hue. They've made some new announcements, which were accidentally leaked apparently on Amazon.com a few days ahead of when they were supposed to come out. But one of the things that they're adding is a capability called motion aware. Now, this effectively allows your light bulbs to indicate that there's motion. So without having to get a sort of a traditional motion sensor device, the way individuals will interfere with the Zigbee radio communication that they have built in, there's enough of a disruption as people come in and out of a room and move around and so on, for them to detect that presence and emotion especially. So I thought, that's quite interesting. There are obviously other ways of detecting motion, but having your light bulbs able to do it for you, it's not a bad idea. And the other thing that jumped out is that the Philips Hue brand are launching a doorbell. So I guess competing with the Ring doorbells and all the other ones on the market. So filling out their stack of consumer tech IoT products, right?
Makes sense for Philips to get into the smart home side of things, and certainly one of the more reputable brands to get into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because I think they carry the Philips name, but I think they sit under Signify. So
Right.
and which I don't think is actually, and these things always move, so I haven't kept my finger completely on the pulse. But I don't think, as far as I'm aware, that Signify is owned by Philips, but I think they've probably got it was a licensing. They bought the Philips Hue brand and they've kind of kept that,
Right.
that naming. They also own, what's the other brand? It's popped out of my head, but it will come back to me. Wiz smart lighting. So that's the other brand that sits under Signify, and I think they've probably got a number of brands overall that sort of within their world, but I'm not sure of the technicalities of their ownership of the Philips branding exactly. So
Probably requires a team of lawyers to actually get to the bottom of
to
that.
figure it all out. Yeah. But it's certainly a really well established brand, and good to see continued action going on. Now, Google, there was the big antitrust case against sort of Alphabet, Google, and there was some suggestion they were going to have to split up the business, and that would mean that Google would have to divest of Chrome, that Google would no longer be able to do search deals, and that that could even create a scenario where Firefox might end up being hurt by this, shall we say, because Mozilla Foundation, who make Firefox, get something like 85% of their revenue from their search deal with Google. So it turns out, thanks to the world of Gen AI, that whilst the judge has ruled that Google is a search monopoly because of the rise of AI, the actual impact of this is nowhere near what it was speculated that it could be. So there's a bit of sort of softening of how they have to do. They can't do exclusive deals with browser manufacturers that block out any other partnerships, but realistically, if they're throwing the most money at it, they probably won't be necessarily be a big difference going forward. I guess that's a little bit of a wait and see.
I'd say they'll still be the default search engine. If they're the default payment provider for Mozilla, stands to reason they'll still be the default search engine, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a possibility with this sort of thing that it ends up in a bit more of a bidding scenario, so that a Microsoft or I mean, there aren't too many other sort of search engines. I guess Microsoft, Yahoo, so Bing and Yahoo. There, maybe in some cases they can buy their way in because it's not a complete
that's true,
a complete lockout. But whether that actually happens, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that would necessarily happen, right? So really, an interesting situation, and I think a lot of those involved in the world of Google and Alphabet will be very very relieved, and I think also for Chrome fans, it would have been quite odd, although
it would have been pros and cons,
some benefits, right?
Yeah. I mean, Google has been really coming down on the types of extensions that you can use. So, I mean, the extension ecosystem for Firefox is now much broader than it is for Google Chrome. But at the same time, there are lots of benefits too. It is the most popular browser, and having a good, strong development team who get fed and paid can only be a good thing.
Yeah, and I think the browser extensions thing. There's quite a sort of cybersecurity and data privacy sort of elements and some complexities there. So that in itself is an interesting topic to delve into. Now, you had highlighted around a bit of a drama going on at the moment with the SalesLoft drift breach. And curious if you can maybe break it down for us.
Sure thing. So SalesLoft is one of those ubiquitous tools that nobody's heard of before, unless you happen to be in the marketing department for a large enterprise.
Hmm.
So SalesLoft is a software as a service tool which is used to enable marketing. So it's often integrated with other tools like Salesforce. It is used by something like 5,000 of some of our largest software providers globally. And they suffered a compromise of their GitHub, actually, early last month. And as part of that compromise, a bunch of authentication tokens were stolen. Now, tokens are a little bit different to passwords. They allow for direct integrations between two software pieces. What that means is they often tend to be valid for much longer. So once enabled and once being used, they can often be valid for years at a time. And if someone manages to steal them, you kind of end up having unfettered access in the same way that that integration would have. So lots of organizations that are well known in the tech sector were affected by this. We've got organizations like Cloudflare, Tenable, Nutanix, lots of others that are really well known who have all been impacted by this. They've had their customer data stolen out of their Salesforce instance. In some cases, it includes not only support tickets, but other secrets such as API tokens, passwords, that sort of thing, which maybe support people were working on with their customers. So this is something that will indirectly impact millions, if not hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, pretty serious. Yeah, there's a website up, isn't there? Driftbreach.com, where it's got the who's who, and probably a lot of listeners will be dealing with some of the firms that have been impacted. Yeah, the likes of Cloudflare, Zscaler, Palo Alto Networks, PagerDuty, Tenable, Megaport, and so on. So yeah, some pretty well known companies, especially in the cybersecurity space, some really big names. So there's some always some learnings to take away from these sorts of scenarios, and I guess we will get more of that over time. One of the aspects here is that the driftbreach.com website shares the dates of some of these breaches, and some of them are reasonably well spread out, shall we say. So they've taken place over from the earlier ones to the most recent ones. These can be net 3 to 4 week period that these breaches have sort of taken place over. So when you look at that, you think there's some lessons in here that some steps that could have been taken to address these if all of the information was appropriately shared, and all of those involved were proactive enough. Now we know in reality these things are easier said than done, but I think there'll be some pretty solid takeaways, and some people maybe
could be some lessons learned. I'd say yes.
hanging their heads afterwards, and recognizing that hey, they've missed a few tricks there along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the longer some organizations wait to disclose that they've had this problem, the more it's going to impact their reputation. I mean, in a lot of cases here, it's not Cloudflare, for example's fault that this breach occurred. And the same goes for these other organizations that have been impacted by the SalesLoft drift breach. But the longer they wait to disclose the fact that they were impacted, the more it's going to affect their reputation.
Yeah, these things are tough. Also, there's a reminder in here, about supply chain issues, about really understanding the firms whose software that you use, right? And I'm sure you will have come across these sort of scenarios where somebody within an organization says, just install this software now. and so the usual sort of checks and balances that should be put in place to look at and consider the appropriateness of a particular vendor, and whether they are the trustworthy organization you would like them to be or not. And I'm not saying this was one where there were indicators up front, because often there isn't. But there is appropriate due diligence that needs to come into play, just as there is with organizations allowing access to browser extensions, right? In 2025, you don't just say, yeah, you can install whatever you want any time, because you don't know what the impact might be of some of those sorts of things.
Absolutely. And what this incident highlights is that even the big boys, even the big players will sometimes get that wrong. But something I am definitely seeing here in New Zealand is at the board level, this is something that's being understood better and better. And we are seeing more boards care about things like a software bill of materials. They care about having third-party risk assessments being done. In fact, in the financial service sector, we're even starting to see a lot more fourth-party risk assessments being done. So people at the board level are definitely starting to pay attention. They're recognizing that this is a risk to the business. It's not just an IT problem, but it is a business risk, and it's something that deserves their attention, which is really great to see.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, it is pleasing to see that we've moved along, because I think from a board perspective, over the years, I think at times it's been concerning, the lack of attention. Now, some of this comes down to what a government can do, and governments can turn sort of certain knobs, and if risks have maybe got to tie in with health and safety, privacy to a degree, then those things, especially health and safety, the legislation there has teeth. But when it's come to cybersecurity and to a reasonable degree data privacy, there hasn't been too much. So there's probably still more opportunity for us as a country to step that up. But of course, any entity that's operating on an international basis has to deal with laws of other countries like Australia, like EU, and so on. And often, there are some more hefty impacts from those other countries and regions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to that point, as I often say to friends, cybersecurity is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You will still be doing this in a couple of years' time, and you may never achieve the nirvana of having a secure state for your organization. There will always be more things.
100%. There's no there is no absolute perfection, right? But I think every organization needs to be on that continuous improvement journey, and every day stepping it up, which brings us, and it's very timely, brings us to delve into nWebbed. And keen to hear a little bit more around what nWebbed are doing, where you're at in your sort of startup journey, because I understand you do this, but you've got another job and so on. So there's a lot that you and your team are juggling. But it's always good to see a strong focus on cybersecurity within New Zealand, and to see smart firms doing new things to help keep us safe. So tell us a little bit more about the story.
Sure thing. So nWebbed Intelligence is a darknet monitoring platform, and it was born out of frustration, basically. So I'm involved in an organization called Hackers Without Borders, a non-profit organization that assists other non-profit organizations around the world with their cybersecurity posture. And there was an incident involving the Red Cross a few years ago, and it was just incredibly frustrating for me, because a lot of the breaches that are occurring there are preventable because we've got the likes of various threat actors who are publishing the fact that, hey, I have these credentials for these organizations. They'll even post them freely on the darknet. And only wealthy organizations, state actors, Fortune 500 companies have access to really high-grade darknet intelligence so that they can respond to those types of threats. Whereas the likes of the Red Cross and, let's face it, most of the general market, they don't have access to that. You know, we have the likes of Have I Been Pwned? And I'm not knocking Have I Been Pwned. It's an amazing tool, but it's very much retrospective. It can tell you if your credentials were in a breach 3-4 years ago, sort of thing. Whereas the high-grade tools, they'll alert you right away if something shows up on the darknet. And so it was incredibly frustrating for me to have access to these things, to see that this type of information was being posted, and yet most organizations in the world didn't really have a means to access that intelligence.
Yeah. So break down for those that aren't familiar with what this sort of darknet monitoring looks like. Yeah.
Sure thing. So let's start with what the darknet is. The darknet is an area of the internet that is not accessible to regular internet browsers. You need special software to access it. Google does not index it, so you can't use a Google search to find things that are on the darknet. And interestingly, it was actually created, I believe it was by the United States Naval Intelligence, to help with anonymized posting and communications around the world to get around oppressive regimes and things like that. However, by nature of how it was created, it required public support, which meant that lots of other people found that it could be used for nefarious purposes because it allows for anonymized use of the internet, and not just accessing the internet in an anonymized fashion, but hosting services in an anonymized fashion. So with that capability, of course, grew an entire cybercrime ecosystem, and actually not just cybercrime, but crime in general, cyber-enabled crime. And that has been growing for well over a decade now. There was, for example, a site called Silk Road, which you may have heard of some time ago. That's getting a bit older now.
Yep.
And lots of others followed suit. And that then matured into lots of cybercrime platforms where different criminals were able to share information and to collaborate, basically, in a way which I really wish the legitimate cybercrime fighting world would do more. So that's the darknet, and darknet monitoring is all about monitoring all of those cybercrime channels where information is being shared, where people like to post their exploits just for reputation, basically. They want to show off how great they are, and so they will post if they've managed to compromise various systems or collect stolen passwords, if they've got stealer malware deployed, or if they've managed to compromise a website and steal all the user passwords. They will often publish that on their hidden darknet forums as a reputational thing. So darknet monitoring is all about having the same level of access that these cyber criminals have and leveraging that collaboration and using it against them by monitoring for it and alerting the people who are actually impacted by those communications.
Yeah, the darknet name, I guess there's some interesting aspects to it, isn't there? There's it's dark to sort of search engines, that you can't just Google it, and I guess there's some darker aspects, you could say, to what can be found there. And I remember, I'd be going back quite a few years ago, but I was asked to come on one of the radio stations and to do some. We did some sort of, and maybe they live streamed it. I can't remember, but we delved into via the Tor browser and into some of the marketplaces that were around at that time, and the fact that there's
So
a
was
lot
that-
of untoward things available.
There certainly are.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there would have been then too. I don't know if that was in the Silk Road days or Black Market Reloaded.
It
or
was,
something
yeah,
like
it was
that.
probably. I'm guessing it was post Silk Road because that goes back a few years, doesn't it?
It does.
It did. Am I remembering correctly that that Trump released the?
He pardoned
or did-
Ross Ulbricht. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That was an interesting one. I don't. That was early, that would have been earlier on this year.
Mm.
I can't remember what the full story was, whether he wasn't well or whether there was a bit more to it in terms of
I
why he
can't
got
remember either.
pardoned. But there was a lot going on in January. So, yeah. So your offering is it's a service that you pay for, sort of, based on what the number of people in your organization, sort of thing.
Exactly right.
Yep.
It's based on the number of users you have. So just as a high level example, you could do employee credential monitoring, and that is charged on a per user basis. So that makes it really easily scalable, whether you're a 10-person organization or a 10,000-person organization, it's equally accessible. And then we also have a product we call Portals, which allows organizations to help protect their reputation against stolen customer credentials, because that's something they have no real control over, but it can impact their reputation.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because Trade Me have been in the media in recent weeks, where folks have gone on to Trade Me. They've picked something that they want to buy from a verified user, who's got a very good reviews and rating, and they've bought something, sent their money off, and then maybe they're not having much luck, so they get hold of Trade Me, and Trade Me like, oh, no, don't send money to them, and it's already too late at that point. Now, possibly Trade Me already have this type of solution in place, and it hasn't got to them quite fast enough. But in a scenario where they were using this sort of tech and they got the information quick enough, this is the sort of thing that would allow them maybe to shut off an account once they become aware that credentials maybe have been breached.
Exactly right. And the platform is designed to enable developers to integrate that directly. So it doesn't need to be a manual process. It can kick off an automated process that resecures the account and keeps their service secure.
Now, I guess the other aspect to these sorts of things, like when I was reading around, Trade Me's scenario, part of the challenge for Trade Me that's come at them is, well, why aren't you, forcing everyone to have multi-factor authentication that would, take a little bit of an edge off this scenario? And they say, well, that's optional, that's up to our users. But because they're not enforcing it, that creates a scenario where now their reputation has been tarnished because they don't know quick enough around account breaches, and they're not insisting on multi-factor authentication. Whereas if you look at in New Zealand, who I think have probably been leading the way in some areas in terms of how they're how they're handling authentication. You've got a different scenario. Not that in New Zealand probably been perfect themselves. They've had their own challenges, but the fact that they adopted pass keys, I think probably ahead of just about anybody of scale within the New Zealand market has sort of led the way. But of course, it's not quite that simple, is it? Because a breach doesn't necessarily have to give away credentials for somebody
right.
to be able to get into an account. Right?
Exactly. So 3 things to unpack here. First of all, for TradeMe, I understand why they haven't enforced MFA. I mean, I work with a number of financial services organizations. These people manage millions, if not billions of dollars, but even millions of dollars for individual people, and they can't get those people to use MFA. I mean, these people are literally prepared to take their millions of dollars and give them to someone else if they're going to enforce MFA. So there's a lot of resistance from the public. That said, I don't think anyone's ever told me about receiving an email from TradeMe recommending MFA. So they probably could be doing a lot more there, let's face it. But to your point about that's not necessarily the silver bullet, what we're seeing a lot of on the darknet, and it's a growing trend, is it's not just the passwords that are being stolen and then published.
Yeah.
We're also seeing something called session tokens or cookies.
Yeah.
And that is so much more dangerous, because if someone steals your session token, and that can be done through stealer malware and malicious browser extensions, if someone steals that, they can get straight into your account. They don't need a password. They can bypass MFA. So you can have MFA enabled. You can have a pass key and MFA, phishing resistant MFA, as Microsoft likes to call it. And they can still get into your account. So it is not a silver bullet. And it's important that people understand MFA is not a silver bullet. But in terms of low-hanging fruit and things you can do to improve your overall security, MFA really is a great one.
Yeah. I think I would hope our listeners, because we've talked about these sorts of topics many times over a very long period of time, are in a good state. But look, if maybe you've got some accounts that you think are less important or what have you, but usually if you've got to log into something, it's something that you probably want to have ownership of. If you're like me, you might not use it at something like TradeMe very often in 2025, right? Too busy, whatever it is. Some people have gone to Facebook Marketplace, and there's all sorts of reasons why not. But yeah,
but does it have your credit card details stored in it?
Yep. Well, these are the important considerations, right? So just take this as a reminder. And of course, we've got listeners that are across large organisations, government, and so on. Let's keep sort of nudging these things forward through education of our teams, and even if it's just your family members, right? Be doing what you can to encourage good habits amongst your family members. We've all got a part to play in reducing these risks, and some of it is with innovative tools that can scan what's going on the dark web. Some of it's just the mundane, keeping our ourselves in a good best practice state by staying on top of 100%, our passwords.
100%. We all have that responsibility, and I really like the point you made. It's not just for ourselves, but for our friends and family as well. Our listeners here, they're probably going to be the tech savvy in the family. So look after your family, look after your friends.
Yeah, it's really a conversation we shouldn't still be having in 2025, but we still keep seeing different things happen. And so, yeah, we've all got a part to play. And look, if you're in an organisation where you can make a difference, TradeMe. Then look, see what you can do to nudge things along a little bit. And look, the TradeMe example, we're kind of calling them out because they have had some attention recently, but this particular scenario that they've had, whereby there's I think 3 parties involved in these transactions. It's a somewhat unusual, scenario that we're seeing. We probably we could run through it quickly. You familiar with what's happened with TradeMe? So I think you've basically had a scenario where some goods get listed or an item gets listed on TradeMe by an account that's been compromised and taken over. The cyber criminal involved then fires up another transaction, which is around, I think, converting cash into crypto. And so a payment gets made by the TradeMe buyer. It basically goes to an account that's been nominated for someone who, as soon as they receive funds, are going to convert it into crypto. And that's kind of how it happens. So you've got somebody who could be anywhere in the world who basically what they receive is the cryptocurrency. They've done a transaction with someone who's expecting X amount of money. Maybe it's $1,000. $1,000 comes into their account, so they hand on that value in crypto. Now there is an element here where those receiving them would probably, in what comes through into their bank account, it might well say TradeMe or some details of the trade. You would expect that would hold some of these transactions up, and maybe it will do now that this one has received some publicity. But yeah, there's a few lessons in there anyway for all of us to be cautious, whether it's those holding crypto and wanting to get involved in selling some, or wherever you sit. So
certainly shows the ongoing ingenuity of cyber criminals. They will always try new methods, and sort of integrating TradeMe with what they call the money mule side of it as well. That's quite new. That's not something we've seen a lot of in the past. So we can see that they're constantly learning, constantly adapting, and we need to do the same. And when I say we, yes, I mean TradeMe as well.
All of us. Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah. Now, one thing that came up in terms of, I guess, collating and scanning the dark net, or the dark web, is what are the ethical sort of concerns there if you're sort of sweeping up and collecting a lot of data from an untoward, from untoward sort of locations? You potentially could be coming across data that you shouldn't have your hands on, right?
Absolutely.
And maybe reasonably large chunks on it. So how do you deal with that in an appropriate sort of way? For instance, probably a situation we come back to, time and time again, because everyone in the country knows about it, was, when the Waikato District Health Board, they were under attack. A chunk of patient data ended up there on the dark web, right? There's the potential of scraping up information that really you probably don't want to have to deal with. But you've
right.
also got to go through and sort of filter through the information that's out there in order to get the gold and the useful information that's going to help people. So how do you deal with that?
So when it comes to the ethics of darknet scanning, I tend to divvy that up into three different groups. You've got those who are doing it ethically, so organizations like nWebbed, where you leverage automation heavily, so you don't want people looking at that stuff manually. Ideally, you want to leverage automation and machine learning and AI.
Because we can trust the bots, right?
Well, we can trust the bots not to go, oh, that's just too juicy for me to ignore. I'm going to have to tell my friends about that. I'm going to have to tell my family about that. Yeah. So we can trust it in that regard. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a good example actually to highlight why these things are important. Right?
So they definitely help us out there. It's also really important to have the right security controls in place. So nWebbed and a number of other organizations as well, we will only release information to an organization after they've proven that they own it. So there are lots of security controls in place to prove that. And we're not alone in that. That is how the ethical organizations conduct themselves. Then if we sort of slide down the hill a little bit to what I'd call morally dubious and ethically gray, there are organizations who they're not scanning the darknet for malicious purposes specifically, but they're pulling everything in and they will sell it to anyone. So they don't do that due diligence. They don't protect that data in the way that they should with the care that they should, given a lot of this is PII, personally identifiable information, healthcare data, financial data, and just incredibly private data a lot of the time. So they don't care about that fact and they will sell it to anyone. They don't have malicious intent, but they're not doing it to help protect anyone either. They're not doing the research to look at the trends so that they can tell us how to better protect ourselves, anything like that. It really is just suck it all up and sell it for $1 if they can. And then finally, right at the bottom of the hill, you've got those who are actually doing this for malicious purposes. And these are the cyber criminals and people who maybe even just started out curious and ended up not being able to resist and going, is that really that person's account? I'm going to tell my friends about that. I'm going to test that. I'm going to see if those credentials are valid. So they maybe didn't start out malicious, but they certainly ended up there.
So within New Zealand, we obviously have the privacy or privacy commissioner. What do you have to do in terms of sort of reporting when you come across different information? What are you compelled to actually do in terms of reporting in that direction?
Because we don't look at any of the information, we follow all the standard security controls around encryption, and basically we have alerting and reporting if anyone from our team accesses that information.
Gotcha. So you're not having to report to them on a daily basis of all the things you've stumbled upon. Because
no. Although we do try to maintain a good relationship.
Because I can imagine. Sometimes the legislation can get a bit complicated in some areas, and we won't delve into what the EU or other markets sort of might require on these sorts of things. But I imagine it actually starts making some of this work quite challenging as well in terms of those requirements.
It does. And again, this is where the automation side of it really comes into play.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So for folks who are interested in maybe finding out a little bit more, maybe they fall into the camp of working in an organisation that could use your technology. Where do they go to find out a little bit more?
They're welcome to reach out to us. Our contact details are available, and there's a contact form available on our website, nWebbed.com. That is nWebbed starting with an N, not with an E.
Excellent. Oh, that's good stuff. Well, it's been great to have you on the show. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Lots packed in there. So really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening in, and of course a big thank you to our show partners, Gorilla Technology, HP, Spark, 2 Degrees, 1NZ, and Workday. Now, of course, if you've been listening in to the audio podcast, do make sure you're following us on the likes of YouTube, so you get access to the videos. You can follow myself, Paul Spain, on LinkedIn as well for our live streams. If you've been watching the video, then of course look out for the audio through your favorite podcast app or audio app such as sort of Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, and so on. All right, thanks everyone. We'll catch you on the next episode. See ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.